Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Ayin Dalid. We're actually a little bit down on Ayin Dalid already because yesterday's last two dafim were pretty short. Let me share my screen and we'll really get started. Um, we are continuing our discussions of mixtures in Perek Ta'arovet, the eighth chapter of Zevachim. Yesterday, we concluded with a case of a ring used to beautify an idol, which got mixed up with 100 other rings, with a total of 100 rings. We saw a statement by Rav Nachman in the name of Rav that if one of the rings was lost in the Mediterranean, the remaining rings could be sold two by two. The sale of one of the rings, right, was certainly permitted because obviously, you only got mixed in one ring that was used for an idol. So one of those two rings would always be definitely permitted. And then the question is you have the uncertainty about which ring that is, and the second ring. You could also say there's a second uncertainty because maybe the ring that was lost in the Mediterranean was the ring that was problematic, and so as a result, this ring is not here. Note that although on some level you could say that same double, the idea is on that you need to have sort of like the two coat that we're going to be seeing can't be that it's all mixed together in one thing. Meaning the one suffix of having everything together is, but you definitely have the problematic piece in front of you. And so as a result, it seems like, at least in the discussions that we're having right now, that is not an uncertainty because then you wouldn't be able to finish all of them because then you would certainly have done something improper. So it seems like in these contexts, we're going to be focusing on uncertainties that it's not even in front of us. And we'll see why I'm saying that over the course of today. Okay. And so as we pick up on the 15th line of Ayin Daled Amud Aleph, Rav Yehuda makes a statement in the name of Rav relating to these rings. So again, 15 lines down, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. So Tabas shel avodas kochavim. If we have one of these rings for avodas kochavim that was used in idolatry, used to beautify the idol, shenis arba b'meyav tabos that gets mixed up with 100 other rings, 100 total rings, ufarshu arbaim l'makom echad, and you move 40 to one side. V'shishim l'makom acher, and you move 60 to the other side. So parsha achas ma'arbaim ena oseres. If you take one of the 40 rings, it's not going to be prohibited. What does that mean? Parsha achas, pirsha achas me'arbaim. Rashi says three from the top of the narrow lines in Rashi. It's about 19, 20 lines down. Pirsha achas ma'arba'im v'nis arba ba'acherot, and you get it mixed up with other rings. So again, you had 100 rings. One of them is problematic. You separated them into two groups, one of 40, one of 60. Clearly, it's more likely to be in the 60 than it is in the 40. Now, one of the 40 get mixed up in something else, and then it's not going to be prohibited. And we're going to explain all of this as we go forward. So if you mix one of those 40 into something else, it's not going to be prohibited. But if you take one of the 60, Osiris, then even then it'll be the new mixture will also be prohibited. So one second, why is it that the one of the 40 isn't going to be problematic? Damrin nisura beruba, you say. It's because we say that the most likely location of the of the bad ring, of the problematic ring, of the prohibited ring, is among the 60 with the majority. So that's why we're going to say that if you take one of the 40 and you put it in with something else, it's going to be a double question, and therefore it's going to be okay. But achas b'shishim nami. But we could say that same double on the same concept with the 60, because amrinan isur beruba isay. Because when you take a look at the 60 and you take one away, more likely it's with the 59 than it is with the 1. So as a result, the 1 should be okay. And so you should have a double uncertainty. Maybe each one of these in the new group is not the one that moved from the other group. And even if it was the one that moved from the other group, maybe that one's not going to be problematic. Maybe that's not the one that's prohibited. So that can't be what Rav said. Ella, here's what Rav said. Im parshu, if arba'im kulan lemakom echad. If you separated all 40 to one place, and Rashi explains, what does it mean? It means that you're going to put all of these new 40 into a new group. So you mix the 40 with 60 others. So ein osros. So then that's not going to be prohibited because shishim lamako, because it's more likely to have been with the 60, and therefore we could say that the 60 is not going, the 40 is not going to be problematic because. So again, we have this double uncertainty. One is maybe it's not in the maybe this is not one of the 40, and even if it was one of the 40, more likely it was part of the 60. And shishim l'makom echad. But if you take the whole 60 and you move it to one side, and then the 60 gets mixed with some others, osros, that would be prohibited because now we have a majority. So it's more likely to be among the 60. And so therefore, we're not going to say the second uncertainty of, well, maybe it was in the other 40. So, Ki Amrita Kamei de Shmuel, when this was said in front of Shmuel, Amrali, he said to me, Hanach la'avodas kochavim, you got to leave aside idolatry because you're talking about rings of idolatry. Shesveka usvek sveka asura ad sof ha'olam. Because Shmuel says that when it comes to uncertainty with respect to an avodah zarah situation, so then that prohibition will go no matter how many doubts you have. So the point is that whether it's a single doubt, a double doubt, whatever, however many it is, it's always going to be prohibited. So in second, is that really true? Because listen, meisvei safek avodah kochavim asura. When you have a single, there's a brisa that says that if there's a single doubt, it's prohibited in connection with idolatry. Usvek sveika muteres. But yet, when you have a double suffix, it's going to be permitted. Ketzad. So what are we talking about? Kos shel avodas kochavim. You have a cup that's used in idolatry. Shenafa la'otzar male kosos, and it falls into a room filled with cups. Kulan asurin. They're all prohibited because that's one suffix. So peresh echad hen liribo. If one of them gets moved to a new group of 10,000, umeribo liribo, and one of the 10,000 gets moved to another group of 10,000, well, now mutarin. Now all of them are permitted because we can say about each group a double set of uncertainty that maybe it's not in that group at all. Maybe it's maybe it's in one of the two other groups. And so each suffix is built on the next. And so you have one suffix that maybe it's not in group 1, but it's in group 2. And then you say, no, maybe it's not in group 1, but it's in group 3. Or maybe it's not in group 2, but it's in group 1. But maybe it's not in group 2, but it's in group 3. And maybe it's not in group 3, it's in group 2 or group 1. So as a result, no matter which group you're looking at, they can all be permitted. So Tanaihi. So in second, so this is clearly a dispute between Shmuel and the Tana of this Brisa, because this Brisa says that double doubts are okay with respect to idolatry. And so we answer that this is a machlokas Tanaim. And that's why it's okay for Shmuel to argue, Shmuel the Amora, to argue with the Brisa from a Tanya, because we have a Brisa that shows that there's a machlokas. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Rimone Badan Osrin B'chol Shehu, that when it comes to these Badan pomegranates, they are going to create a problem if they are mixed with any amount. Now, what are these pomegranates that we're talking about? Well, we saw 2 days ago on Dab Ayin Bet Bet that in fact these are one of the 6 specified kinds of items that are never going to be batal because they're so important, they're so significant. And so if there was a Badan pomegranate that was either Orla or Truma, and it got mixed up with other pomegranates, the entire mixture needs to be treated like Orla or Truma, as the case may be. So Ketzad, and what's the example, according to Rabbi Yehuda, of where the pomegranates get mixed up? Nafal echad mehen l'toch ribo, if one falls into the 10,000, umeribo l'ribo, and the 10,000 falls into another group of 10,000, asurin, they're all prohibited. And as Rashi tells us, last of the narrow lines in Rashi, Tanaihi Detanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rimone Badan Chulu, Rimone Badan Echad Meshisha Dvarim She'enam Betelim. As we just mentioned, the Rimonim from Badan are one of the 6 items that are never going to be batal, according to the rabbis. Hilkach Osrin B'Kolshu. Therefore, they're going to create a problem, even if there's just a very small minority of them. Im shel Orla, O shel Truma, if they belong to Orla or Truma, Hain. Kulan Asurin Vafilu Achronim. And even the last group where you fall from one 10,000 into another 10,000, they're all going to be prohibited, highlighting that even a multiple sfeikot is going to also be prohibited, according to Rabbi Yehuda.
That's 1 in 100 million.
1 in 10,000 times 10,000. Yeah, 100 million.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So they're very small.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, who I believe is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Reribo Asurin. When it comes into the first 10,000, they're going to be prohibited. But Umeribo Lishlosha, if one of them falls into a group of 3, and we'll see, do we mean a total of 3 or 3 others? Umishlosha l'makom acher. And then one of those 3 goes into another group, mutar. Well, then we have the double uncertainty, and so as a result, there at least the last 2 groups are going to be mutar. You could argue that maybe even the first group is going to be mutar. Shmuel de Amar Kaman. So Shmuel de Amar Kaman. So 1 second, you're saying, and obviously according to Rabbi Shimon, you can apply the concept of a double uncertainty and say it's mutter. So who are you saying? So yes, there is now, we've seen a machlokas about whether we say svek sveka applies. But who are you thinking that Shmuel's going to be like? Rabbi Yehuda, if you're telling me that he's like Rabbi Yehuda, afilu b'shari surim asar. Well, Rabbi Shmuel says that double doubts in idolatry are problematic. And if you're going to tell me that he's like Rabbi Yehuda says that double doubts are even problematic in the connection with Trumas and Maestros when it comes to the Badan pomegranates. And so as a result, he should be consistent and say it's if he's holding like Rabbi Yehuda, he should say that even outside the area of idolatry, it can be problematic. And Ika Rabbi Shimon, and if you're telling me that he holds like Rabbi Shimon, well then, and Rabbi Shimon is the one who says that double doubts are okay. Well, then even in idolatry, it should be okay. So v'chitema shiny leil Rabbi Shimon bein avodas kochavim l'shari surim. And if you want to tell me that Rabbi Shimon differentiates between avodas kochavim and other kinds of prohibitions, Elahadetanya, but we've got another brisa that says the following: Safek avodas kochavim asura usvek sveka muteres. As we just saw, that there's this brisa that says that when you have a double uncertainty with respect to idolatry, it's going to be permitted. So mani. So even if you tell me that Shmuel could be qualified, we still have a brisa that seems to be inconsistent with either Rabbi Yehuda or Rabbi Shimon. Mani, who is that brisa like? Lo Rabbi Yehuda, but lo Rabbi Shimon. So la'olam Rabbi Shimon. Now, you know what? We could really say that it is Rabbi Shimon. Ushmuel savarla Rabbi Yehuda b'chada and upalik alei b'chada. That really he does agree with Rabbi Shmuel agrees with Rabbi Shimon, and he disagrees and he agrees with, but he only agrees with him outside the area of idolatry. So in that regard, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda, who says that when it comes to idolatry, even a sex fake is going to be problematic. But Rabbi Shimon says, but otherwise he holds like Rabbi Shimon, who says that idolatry is not problematic. And as far as who is this, the author of that brisa, the author of the brisa is Shmuel, and he holds like everything is consistent, meaning he holds that every double doubt is going to be okay, even in the case of idolatry. So that is sorry for not scrolling. So that is answer number one to our question, but we're now going to analyze. We're potentially, according to one explanation of Rashi, going to offer another answer to how do we understand Shmuel, because again, Shmuel says that only in idolatry is a double doubt problematic, still going to be problematic. Everywhere else, a double doubt is going to be okay. And so the question is, how can Shmuel say that? We don't seem to have an opinion that's like that. We're going to give another answer to this question in a little while. But potentially another answer to the question in a little while. But in the meantime, what did we say? Amar mar meriba lishlosha umishlosha lemakom acher. We said that one of the 10,000 of the pomegranates, according to Rabbi Shimon, gets mixed up with three of the others, and then from those it goes into another group. And then we said it's mutar. Then we said that the groups are mutar, at least the second two groups, but possibly even the first group. So maishna shlosha. Why did it need to be three? De ikaruba. Well, you're going to tell me because you need a majority. Shnayim nami ikaruba. If it fell into two others, it would be sufficient because you have one out of three. And so one out of the three is problematic. Two out of the three are not problematic. And so as a result, the majority is not problematic. So why did it even need to be that it fell into three? It could have fallen into two. So, my gimel dekatani, what did we mean when we say that it fell into three? Tarti vahu. It's three, including the one that fell in. So it's a total of three. And that makes a lot of sense because, by the way, when we say that something fell into 100, we then divided it between 60 and 40. So when we said we fall into 100 is that it fell into a group that became 100. So to here, we're going to say that it fell into a group that became three. So the ibayasema. Now the question is, or you can say. Now there are two ways to read this, and we'll go through Rashi in detail, and we'll see that Rashi offers two potential explanations to this. Savarla Rabbi Eliezer. Or maybe he holds like Rabbi Eliezer. So this answer of maybe he holds like Rabbi Eliezer can refer to two statements of Rabbi Eliezer, and it could be a statement of Rabbi Eliezer that we've seen already, and it's an answer on why it doesn't say, when it says falls into three, it means really three. Because really what's happening is that you need four in order for it to be permitted, because it's like the Rebbe Eliezer, who Rabbi Elazar explained the statement of Rebbe Eliezer that says you have to sell the rings 2 by 2. That's why I mentioned it in the introduction. And so in order to have an even number of pomegranates that you'd be able to say are going to be okay, because for each pair that you sell, you'll be able to say one is definitely not problematic, and the other one, maybe it's in the different groups. so it's also not problematic. So that's why you need to say that it's going to be okay. And so but that's one possible answer. Or we could say, no, this is going back to the earlier question of how could it be that Shmuel is saying that only in connection with idolatry is a double doubt problematic, in which case it's referring to a statement of Shmuel in Maseches Avodah Zarah. So let's take a look in Rashi, and he'll help us understand that version of the answer, because that's what he covers first. So second line on Ayin Daled Amud Bet. The Ibayas aim is Savar La Rabbi Eliezer Shmuel de Amar Sfek Sveka Davodas Kochavim Aser de Amar Rabbi Eliezer. So when we say that, so this is the answer again. Who is it that Shmuel is like? It's like Rabbi Eliezer. Now, what Rabbi Eliezer is it? So first, we got to give you background on the Mishnah that we're going that where Rabbi Eliezer is going to make a comment. So this is not Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. D'Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, the Maseches Avodah Zarah on Daf Mem Tet Amud Bet, Natal Heimena Eitzim Asurim. So if you have wood that is prohibited because it was used for Avodah Zarah, Asurim Bahana. So if you take out of any of that wood, it's going to be prohibited to benefit from it. Hasik bahen es hatanur chadash. If you use it to fire a new oven. Now, it's important to note that when you fire a new oven, it is going to cause that oven to be finalized, to finish. And so by finishing the new oven, you're going to, it's going to be a permanent problem with the oven, because it's not just that the taste of the oven is going to be there, or that you've used the fire to cook something, but the oven itself has been finished with it. And so as a result, anytime you use the oven, you're going to be benefiting from that firing of the oven. So therefore, yutats, you need to break it. Yes.
But if it's smashed up and you put it back together, Rabbi Eliezer famously says you can use it.
Yes, because then you're not. What is it that you're benefiting from the usage of? You're benefiting from the usage of burning it so that it becomes a final single product. But if you break it up and you put it back with water and you mush it all and you get it back into a state of mud, and now you refire it in a kosher way, you're finalizing a new oven that doesn't have any of the benefits of the old oven. Right? The old oven benefited from the firing because you've permanently made it into its current state. So as a result, you need to break it up and to create a whole new thing, because every time you use the oven, you'd be benefiting from that firing, which was the fire from idolatry. But if you break it up and you make it into a whole new object, so then there's no benefit from that original fire. And that's why it's going to be okay, because it's not about taste. If it was about taste, maybe you'd have to worry that some of that taste is going to still stick around. Okay, so continuing on, we're now Yutat's first word on the. So now we're at the second word on the first narrow line. If Rashi on Anayin Daled Amud Bet, Yashan. If it's an old oven, so Yutzan. So then all you have to do is let it cool off. Afabo, because again, the oven itself is fine. The only problem is anything that you would cook with it. If you let it cool, everything goes back to fine, because there's no taste of idolatry. That is not. It's not a prohibited taste that's going to be a problem. Yutzan. I'm sorry. Yutzan. Okay. Afabo es hapas. Continuing on, first narrow line of Rashi. If you baked in it some bread, asura bahana. That bread is prohibited to benefit from. Nis'arba ba'acheros, ba'acheros ba'acheros. If you mix that bread up with other bread, and then that other bread with more other bread, asurot b'hana. It's all prohibited with hana. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yolich hana liyam hamelach. That in fact, Rabbi Eliezer goes so far as to say, you know what? Once you've got it so mixed up, all you have to do is throw throw money associated with the benefit into the Yam HaMelech. Alma, so we see, Islay Rabbi Eliezer, Svek Sveka Bavodas Kochavim. Clearly, He holds that when it comes to a sveka, even when you've got the others mixed up with others, you still have to throw money into the Yam HaMelech. And so therefore, he would say that if you didn't throw the money into the Yam HaMelech, it would all be prohibited. Midikatani v'acheros b'acheros, because we said acheros b'acheros. Now the problem with this answer, the problem with this explanation of the Ibayas Ema saying that what we're doing is really answering the question with respect to Shmuel is I don't understand. Shmuel's, why don't we cite the Tanakama? The Tanakama also says that it's all mixed up. So maybe you could say that the Tanakama we know from somewhere else that he holds that the double suffix is a problem everywhere, and therefore it couldn't be, Shmuel would be inconsistent with it. But in any event, Lishna Achrina, there's another way that we can say what the Ibayas Ema is about. Savara Karebi Eliezer, a Rabbi Shimon Kai. It's going not on the question about Shmuel, but it's going on the question on Rabbi Shimon. Why did Rabbi Shimon say that you needed to put it with a group of three? Da'amar meribo legimel. And why did he throw it from one into a group of three? V'teirutzna mai shlosha dekatani trevahu. And we gave the answer immediately before, that we're referring to three of two in it. The Ibayas Ema. And you could say, you know what? Maybe gimel dafka. Maybe no, three means three. V'teka'amrina and tizki betray savar la karebi alazar. And the fact that we said that it's not good to amar lo hitter Rebbe Elazar ella shnayim, and that which we said that it's going to be falling into that it's not a group of three but a group of four. That's going to be like Rebbe Elazar, because Rebbe Elazar in his interpretation of Rebbe Eliezer says that you need to have 2 by 2, you need to sell the rings. Hilkach be'ina de lahavu arba delishgalinhu shnayim v'rishon yashar be'enai. But I think the first interpretation is better. But in any event, those are the two interpretations that Rashi gives. Tosos, again, basically, for in part the reason that I noted, rejects Rashi's first answer and ends up going with Rashi's second answer. But those are the two answers, and it's again worth noting that you can clearly here in this case, it's a very confusing or ambiguous the Ibayas Ema, and so we can actually answer it in two different ways. Query whether maybe both of them have some aspect of being correct. Okay. So we've given one situation of rings. We need to do more mixtures. So more mixtures. Here we go. So Amaresh Lakish Chavis Shel Truma. If you have a barrel of Truma. Now, we are going to say that the barrel of Truma that we're talking about is a barrel that is closed. And the reason that we're going to say that is because we saw again on Ayin Bedam and Bet that this is one of the 6 things that never gets nullified, a closed barrel. And so that's why Rashi says, okay, and now we say, V'nafla achas mihen, I'm sorry, Shinis arba mimea chavios, and now it gets mixed up with 100 others. So if we go back into Rashi, the very next Rashi on the daf, it says, Stumos, they've got to be closed. Because we said earlier, shehein echad shisha dvarim she'enim b'telim, because it's one of the 6 items that is not going to become nullified. V'nafla achas mehen liyam hamelach, and now one of them falls into the Dead Sea. Hutru kulan, all of them are going to be permitted. Damrinan hach de nafal to isur nafal, because we'll say that the one that fell in is going to be the one that was prohibited. If this sounds familiar, you're absolutely right, because Rav Nachman said in the name of Rav that that's what Rav says about rings. That if one of the rings of idolatry were to fall into the well, he said that Yama Gadol, but same basic idea that if they were to fall into the Yama Gadol, so then all the rings are going to be okay. So v'itzrich, and we need the Rav Nachman, v'itzrich the Reish Lakish. You know what? You need to know that Rav Nachman says his rule and Reish Lakish says his rule, and that both of them are true. Because the midah Rav Nachman. Because if I only had Rav Nachman's rule, hava amina hanimila avodas kochabim de'ein lo matirin, I would have thought, okay, we need to be lenient in the case of idolatry, because if we're not lenient, all these other 100 rings are all going to go to waste because you can't do anything with them. About truma, the yesh lo matirin, but truma has a way you can solve the problem, as Rashi tells us. 2 lines down from where the last Rashi ended. Truma yesh lamatirin yim karim kulam lekohanim. You could just sell them all to a kohen, and then it'll be fine. So as a result, maybe we would not apply this theory. So as a result, we need, even if you teach me Rav Nachman, I need to know Reish Lakish's theory. The imin de Reish Lakish, and if we only had Reish Lakish, hava amina chavis, I might have thought that that's true with respect to a barrel. Because it's obvious when one of them is missing. As Rashi tells us, chavis gedola mikoma. Barrels take up a large amount of space. Nikar kishehi netula. It will be obvious if it is taken away. Michavroseha from the other ones, right? I mean, you have 100 barrels, even 100 barrels. You're gonna have. It's gonna be obvious when one of them is missing, because it takes up floor space. Hilkach minkar and nefilasa. So it's going to be obvious that one of them is missing. Umuchacha milsa deba talia. And so as a result, when one is missing, we know that that's the fact that it's missing is why we're allowed to now use all of the other barrels. Below asila meimar l'kulo sharu, and nobody will come to think that maybe all of them are permitted. Below nefilas echad liyam, without one of them falling into the sea. But back into the Gemara, aval tabas. But when it comes to the ring, and now we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down middle of the line. But when it comes to the ring, Delo minkara, it's not noticeable. Delo minkara nefilasa. Low, that maybe we wouldn't say it with respect to the rings, because maybe we would be concerned that when it comes to rings, you know what? If we had a ring and one fell in, we'll say, people won't notice that the ring is missing, and therefore they'll say, oh, you're just allowing, when it's 1 in 100, to use all the rings. But no, it's not because it's 1 in 100, it's because one of them fell in. So as a result, Srichi, we do need to teach both sets of rulings. Okay? So Amar Rabba, all right, so as a result, we have both sets of rulings. Now we're going to have a machlokus within Reish Lakish. Rabba, Amar Rabba, lo hitir Reish Lakish ela chavis de minkar and nefilasa. Actually, you know what? Reish Lakish believes that being clear and noticeable in its missingness is what's crucial for his ruling. Aval te'ena lo. But if we were talking about figs, well, then that we would not say the same rule. For Rav Yosef Amar, and as Rashi says, te'ena ketanahi, because those are very small. Ve'ein makom chasrona nikar, and in the place, if it were to fall into the sea, it wouldn't be obvious that it was missing. The nefila, okay, and back into the Gemara, the Rav Yosef, the second word on the line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down on Ayin Dalet on a bed. The Rav Yosef Amar, afilu te'ena, no, even by figs. Kinefilasa kak aliyasa, just as it falls in, it comes out. So as Rashi says, kinefilasa kak aliyasa, kishem shetchilas nefilasa betocha heter nechsheves be'einecha lasor es elu. So just as when one fig that's very small falls in and we consider it as if it's in front of your eyes and therefore it's going to be prohibited, so too, we'll say the same thing when it leaves, meaning just as it comes in, it becomes problematic. so too when one goes out, it can be permitted. So, because obviously one is significant in that context. Okay. So now we're going to have some more rulings about barrels of truma. So first we're going to have Rabbi Lazar and then Rabbi Oshaya. So Amar Rabbi Lazar, Chavis shel truma shenafla big kuf chaviot. So you have a 1 barrel of truma that falls, and obviously we're talking about wine. 1 barrel, because that's what's usually in barrels. 1 barrel of truma wine, and it fell into 100 other barrels. And again, Rashi tells us that we're talking about stumot. Rashi actually adds that as if it were language of the Gemara, that delo betelos, because it's not going to be batel, because as we saw, it's one of the 6 items that it will never become batel. So poseach echad mehen, if you open one of them, v'noto haimenu kedei dimua v'shose. You know what you can do? You can open it, and then poseach echad mehen, Rashi tells us, we're now marking up from the bottom of the narrow lines. It's 3, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 lines up in the narrow lines of Rashi. Poseach echad mehem, the kevan de nifsecha yesh la bittel. Once you open it, it's no longer a closed barrel that is unable to be nullified. It now becomes an open barrel that is capable of being nullified. And hilkach noto emenu kedei dimua achas mimeya abachas. Now you have 1 in 101, and so as a result, pull out 1/101th of the wine that's in it, and dedicate that for truma and to a kohen sheba daha achas nisarva bekuf, because we had 1 mixed with 100. So take 1/101 out, and now you're going to be, the rest is going to be permitted because it's all mixed together. So as a result, that should be fine. So Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamar la hashmaisa. So Rav Dimi was telling over this ruling of Rabbi Elazar. Amar alei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said to him, Gama v'shasi kachazina hacha. Look who's a big drinker here, because these are 2 different ways of referring to drinking. So whether you drink fast or drink slow, but in any event, bottom line is it seems like what he's saying is, look at the meaning. Are you so experienced in drinking? Are you so desired to drink that you're going to be so lenient? Because I don't think, as Rashi tells us, V'shasika chazina haka de'im kain. If what you're saying is true, now we're 1 second. We're 1, 2. It's the next. Yes, the next Rashi in the daf. So de'im kain deposeach lechatchila, that you're allowed to open it lechatchila had the kaimelan chavios stumos the low butli hechi mishkachasla. Everybody's going to be able to drink, because no matter if you're going to say that you can open it up in order to create the bittul, well then when would you not have bittul? Because after all, how can you access the wine without opening it up? So that can't be. It can't be. It must be that the idea of opening it up is only if it was opened, if it was opened by itself, if somebody unknowingly, if somebody third party or some animal opened it, then it would be true. But if you open it intentionally, that or even accidentally, it's not going to be true. As we saw previously, that when often the rabbis will treat an accidental opening like an intentional opening. All right, Yosef Rav Dimi. Okay, so sorry. So Ella Ema Niftecha Achas Man. So don't say that you opened, but rather it was open. Use the passive. Notel Haimenu Kedei Dimu V'Shosef. In that case, then you could do what you're saying, and so that's how. And in fact, that seems to be how we conclude la halacha. Amar Rabbi Oshia. Rabbi Oshia says, you know what? Chavis shel truma shenis arba b'meya v'chamishim chavios. What happens if you got 1 mixed with 150? Niftechu meya mehen. if 100 of them were opened, and now we're building on Rav Nachman's statement, and so we're saying that they were opened accidentally. Noto heimenu kedei dimua v'shose. You could take out the amount that you want, and that is the percentage associated with the truma, and you can drink. Ushar asurin achi yipaschu, and the rest are going to remain prohibited until they're accidentally opened. Meaning that even though if we were to ask the question from a percentage standpoint, are we most likely to have already opened the relevant barrel? The answer is yes, because we opened 100 of them. But even so, because what we've taken out of those barrels is only 151st of them. So as a result, you can't just rely on the majority and say that the rest are okay. Lo amrin and asura biruba isi. We're not going to say that the prohibited one is in the majority. Okay, so the Gemara then continues by quoting back our Mishnah. Our Mishnah noted that there are certain animals that are forbidden for sacrifice.
828.
Well, we're just going to finish this last little bit. Haroveya v'nirba. So what is that about? Bishla makula lo yadia. So again, we said that if there's an animal that is a treifa, it's going to be, you're still going to be able to, it's going to all be mixed up. And so as a result, you let them all graze, and you wait until a blemish comes, and then you'll be able to redeem them and bring a new korban. But bishlam makula lo yadia, it makes understandable, when it comes to every other category. You can't tell whether an animal's been sodomized or anything else. But elahai treifa hekidami. But when it comes to the treifa, how is your explanation? If you know it's a treifa, lacy, go and take it. Elo yadalay, and if you don't know how it come it's a treifa, mina yada di'arav. How do you know that it got mixed in? So 3 answers. Amri debei Rabbi Yanai. So the first answer is hacha b'mayaskin and kigon di'arav nikuvas hakots bedrusas hazav. That we're mixing something that was pierced with a thorn, which is not a treifa, with something that was attacked by a wolf, which is a treifa. As Rashi explains, that the wolf attack is likely to lead into the death, whereas the piercing by a thorn, which does the exact same damage, is not. Reish Lakish gives answer number 2. Kikon di arev v'nefula. We're talking about an animal that fell from a roof, and we have the concept that if an animal fell from a roof, and if it was not within and if the animal and you check, and the question is whether the animal can get up and walk away. But if and that the question that's associated with that is really potentially determined after 24 hours. So nefula nami livdika. Why don't you just check it? Kasavar amda tricha me'es la'es. Halacha tricha vidika. No, we're dealing with a situation where it requires checking. And the point is that right now we're going to be offering these sacrifices. And so as a result, we don't know, you can't do the checking right this instant. You have to wait 24 hours in order to be able to do it. And Rabbi Yirmiyah Amar kagon de iyarev bivlad treifa. No, what we're dealing with is the child of a treifa, and as a result, you can't tell the difference between a child of a treifa and some other animal. Rabbi Eliezer, and this is Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar vlad treifa lo yikrav legavi mizbeach. So kula Rabbi Yanai lo amri. So we don't say like Rabbi Yanai because bein nikuvas hakots ledrusas hazaev meidei, because maybe you should be able to tell the difference between a thorn and a wolf attack, because after all, the wolf attack is going to have extended tears, whereas a thorn is going to create a round piercing. Karesh Lakish lo amri, and they don't like Reish Lakish's answer, kasavri amda eina tzricha ma'as leis, because they think that if the animal gets up, well, then you don't need to wait 24 hours. Halacha eina tzricha bedika, and if it actually walks, you don't need to actually check all its internal organs to be able to determine whether or not it's still a treifa. And Rabbi Yirmiyah lo amri, and the opinions that don't like Rabbi Yirmiyah, they don't like Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Eliezer lo mukmi, because they don't want to establish the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer is not who we generally paskin like. So now the Gemara is ready to turn to a discussion of when multiple identical sacrifices for different people get mixed together. But for that discussion, stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. My apologies for going a little long.